This is Raymar Vettner. Welcome to video number 9 in this series on tutorials on how to use Logos Biblesoftware to prepare for the Sabbath School lesson. And thank you to all of you thousands of people who are watching these videos every week. I'm happy that you are enjoying them. Please share them with your friends, put them out on Facebook, email your friends about this. I appreciate that a lot. Since some of you have been coming into my series a bit into the series, today I plan to give you some tips that some of you have heard me say already earlier on in this quarter. But I'm going to give you some tips on Sunday, what you can do to study the Sunday's lesson, Monday and Tuesday. 3 tips there. One of them is new, 2 of the tips you've heard before if you've been with the series from the beginning. Then on Wednesday and Thursday, the parable of the Good Samaritan, I'm going to teach you some insights into that parable that I share with my New Testament theology students. So let's begin with Logos, and let's go to Sunday. The topic on Sunday is the authority of Jesus. And I'd like to show you how you can search for what one author or all your books have to say about Jesus and authority. So search is done. One way to do search is to click on this search icon, the magnifying glass up in the top, on the top of the screen. If you drag it down, you can put it to whatever part of the screen you would like it to be. There are different kinds of searches here. The last 3, clause, morphology, syntax, has to do with searching in the Greek or Hebrew grammar. We're going to leave that for now. Media means you're searching for images and videos in your Logos library. Bible means you're only going to search for words and phrases in the Bible text. And basic is where you're searching your entire library. Right now we're going to search for the word authority. So let's click in the search field, type authority. Now we don't want any kind of authority. We want Jesus' authority when he's teaching. So one way to do that is if you scroll a little bit down here on this page, you will see some tips on how to write your search syntax. For instance, if you type in one word and then within, let's see, or near, or before or after, or within 4 words. So if you do Jesus within 4 words of Christ, you will get passages, paragraphs where these 2 words are within 4 words of each other. In this case, let's type Jesus within, we can do 4, we can do maybe 6 words, Jesus. All right, let's do that and see how it goes. It searches all text, and then you can limit the search to whatever kind of books you have in the library. Right now I have searched books that I have tagged with the tag NT1. I have tagged all my books in the library with different tags. I've shown you this earlier. I'll just open the library here. These are all the books, and if you click on this icon, information icon, you can add tags to books. So I've tagged all my Gospels books, NT1, all my Acts book, NT2, all my books about Paul's epistles, NT3, and so on. So for me, the different sections of the New Testament, I have those together. You can tag the Gospel books Gospels, you can tag things any way you want. So I've now searched all my NT1 books, that's all the books about the Gospels, for the word authority, close by the word Jesus. And here we have found a lot of paragraphs about Jesus and authority, and you can read that. Or you can just search for everything if you want to search your entire library, and it also searches for images and atlas and everything. So right now it's probably better to search just some books. You could search, for instance, title and Gospels, or we can do Gospels or Matthew or Mark or Luke in the in the title. So now it's searching all those books that have oh, that turns out to be Matthew, Mark, and Luke. All right. All right. Here we are. Yeah, when you start typing in a limitation for your search, it's supposed to drop down with the number of books you have in your library that fit this category of title, either Gospels or Matthew or Mark or Luke. All right, let's try that instead. That should give a better result. All right, so now it's searching all those the books that have to do with the Synoptic Gospels for the words authority and Jesus. So if you haven't tagged all your books, no worries. You can make a quick little collection and search, or you can just search all the books that have to do with Luke. It says, oh, I got 282 books that has to do with Luke. All right, so this is one way to limit your search so it doesn't search the entire library. It stays with the most relevant part of your library. Some of you I know have the Ellen White collection of books in Logos. Maybe you bought it a long time ago. For the moment, Logos doesn't sell the Ellen White package because they're going to improve the formatting and the tagging of all her books. So for the moment it's not for sale, but if you do happen to have Ellen White's books before, maybe you have tagged them already. If you haven't tagged your books, you can in the library do author White Ellen, and you will get all of Ellen White's books here. And then you can just tag them. Control A for selecting all 62 resources, and you can add a tag like E.G. White. I have already tagged all Ellen White's books in my library with my tag Ellen White. So my tag E.G. White. So now I can search only in Ellen White's writings about Jesus and authority. Isn't that interesting? So if you have specific authors you enjoy taking a look at, give them a tag, whatever tag you want, and then you can search for whatever you're searching for just within the books of that author. All right, that was a new little tips we haven't talked so much about before. That's useful for Sunday, and that talks about the authority of Jesus. Jesus had a unique authority when he was teaching, and you can read more about it if you're searching for authority within a certain number of words or near Jesus. Monday's lesson talks about the Sermon on the Mount, which in Luke is called the Sermon on the Plain. It might have been on another occasion. Jesus was preaching a lot, and now he preached material in Luke 6 that is very similar to what he's teaching in Matthew 5. And so you might want to like to compare Matthew 5 with Luke 6. Do you remember how to do that? You go up in your library, you type harmony, and then you will find the different gospel harmonies that you have. The best one is the one that's edited by Nestle Alan. Where did that one go? Here. Synopsis of the 4 Gospels, but any kind of harmony of the Gospels that you have, you open. And then you just type in the text, in this case Luke 6, 20 to 49. And now you can compare Matthew and Luke. So first we have the Beatitudes. You have Matthew's version and you have Luke's version. You notice that Luke's version is shorter, and there are some small differences. For instance, when Matthew has blessed are the poor in spirit, those who feel spiritually poor, Luke has it more literal. Blessed are you who are poor. Not poor in spirit, but those who are literally poor. God will bless you in a special way. If you don't have many blessings in this world, well, Jesus will take care of you. You will be blessed. So Luke has it more literal. Matthew has a sermon where Jesus is talking about those who are poor in spirit. So you can go through the sermon and compare Matthew and Luke. That was a little tips for you for Monday when you are studying Christ's greatest sermon, the Sermon on the Plain in Luke. On Tuesday, There are several passages where I invite you to look at about Jesus and family, and when you're part of Jesus' group as the follower, you are part of Jesus' family. Luke 5, Luke 7, Luke 14 and 17. Just remind you that the passage guide is a great way to get a lot of information in one place. So if you type in Luke 5, 27 to 32, you can get a lot of resources in one place. It will show you the commentaries you have, cross-references to other parts of the Bible that talks about similar ideas, ancient literature, church fathers, and others who, in this case, church fathers who quoted or alluded to Luke 5, parallel passages, some cultural concepts that might be important. So if you use the passage guide, you will get a lot of information in one place. Even at the bottom here, you have a lot of sermons that you can download and read and see if you get some ideas for your Sabbath School discussions, reading the sermons that pastors have written. So that's a suggestion for you on Tuesday. The 4 texts there are very suited for the passage guide. Finally, Wednesday and Thursday, it's talking about the famous story about the Good Samaritan. So let's head over to that parable, and I will not so much teach you Logos as I will give you some insights on the parable itself that you can share with your Sabbath School class. So remember that the parable of the Good Samaritan is given within a specific context, within a specific story. There is a lawyer. A lawyer at the time of Jesus was a Bible scholar. Probably a better word would be a theologian or Bible professor. It's one of those who had as a big part of their life to study the scriptures, to study the Torah, and to find out what it says. He stood up to put Jesus to the test. By the way, just the fact that he stood up, usually a disciple would usually sit down. If you stand up, he shows that he's an equal to Jesus. Is he arrogant? Maybe, maybe not. Maybe he considered himself to be an equal of Jesus. Jesus is a big rabbi. He considered himself to be a great rabbi. Teacher, what shall I do to inherit eternal life? That's a good question. How can we be saved and get eternal life? Jesus says, what is written in the law? Typical rabbinical technique Jesus has. Answering a question with another question. So Jesus wants a dialogue. In the secular world, this is often called the Socratic method, answering a question with a question. The Jewish rabbis did this a lot to foster thinking, to stimulate thinking. Remember what Ellen White said repeatedly, that we need to train people who are not mere reflectors of other people's thoughts, but who are thinkers. And Jesus is trying to make this Bible scholar into a thinker by engaging in a dialogue. What is written in the Torah, in the law? How do you read it? And so you get a little discussion about some passages from the Old Testament. You should love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your strength. From Deuteronomy 6, the most important passage in the Hebrew Bible for Jews, the Shema. And then, hear, O Israel, the Lord is one, and you should love him with all your heart. So, very important text. He knows that one. The Jews were meditating on that frequently. It's like John 3:16 for Christians. And then, of course, Leviticus, you should love your neighbor as yourself. Now, in Judaism, there was a big discussion about this text in Leviticus 19. What does it mean to love your neighbor as yourself? Who is my neighbor? Is it just my immediate family? Is it my entire village? Or is it all the Jews? This was a discussion at the time of Jesus. Who exactly constitute my neighbor? Is it just my family or my village or the entire nation of Israel? Very few, if any, thought that the concept of a neighbor applied to Gentiles. That's an important background for the story of the Good Samaritan. The discussion in Judaism at the time, who is my neighbor? So, after that little introduction, and the guy asking, who is my neighbor, in verse 29, Jesus tells the parable of the Good Samaritan in order to answer the question, in order to give Jesus' view, his view about who constitutes my neighbor. Who should I treat nicely, according to Leviticus? So Jesus tells the story of a man going down from Jerusalem to Jericho. A quick word about parable interpretation. Ever since the early church, there's been a tendency to read a lot of parables as allegories when they were not supposed to be allegories. We have a tendency, in order to be very spiritual, to look for symbols everywhere. The early church fathers saw a lot of odd symbols in this text. Church Father Augustine, for instance, saw the innkeeper in verse 35 as the Apostle Paul, and so on. One of the church fathers had the donkey as a symbol of Jesus, because Jesus was carrying this man. So people have seen a lot of symbols. Now, there are parables of Jesus that contain symbols. We have one of the parables about the sower. The grain fell on different kinds of soil, and the different types of soil, like, from the good soil that gave a lot of harvest, to the road, to the thorn bushes. The different kinds of soil, of ground, were types or symbols of different kinds of people who were more or less receptive to the word of God, which is probably the meaning of the grain that was sown. So that's an example of a parable that is full of symbols. Another one is one of the vineyard parables, which Jesus based on Isaiah. God had a vineyard, so the owner of the vineyard is God. The vineyard in Isaiah is the people of Israel, and then the owner sent a lot of servants to try to pick up the harvest from the tenants, the stewards of the vineyard. So the stewards of the vineyard is a symbol of the leaders of Israel at the time of Jesus. And then when God sent different kinds of servants to pick up the harvest, then that might be a symbol of different prophets God had sent throughout history. And finally, the owner sends his own son, symbol of God the Father sending Jesus. So the parable of the vineyard has a lot of symbols. It's an allegory. It's a parable that has a lot of symbols. The parable of the sheep that was lost, the parable of the one coin that was lost out of the 10 in Luke 15. These parables are symbols. Jesus didn't give a lesson about agriculture or how to be a good shepherd and take care of literal sheep. These are symbols. The lost sheep, the lost coin is a symbol of a person who's lost. So clearly there are parables that are allegories. They have symbols, and we should try to interpret the symbols. But sometimes Jesus has parables that are not full of symbols. Scholars call them more of example stories. They are examples of people who are behaving well and people who are behaving not so well. And we should learn lessons from these people. We should imitate the good people, and we should avoid doing what the bad people are doing. They are example stories. They are fiction in the sense that this didn't historically happen as a true story. Jesus made it up as a moral lesson. So it is a parable, but it doesn't have symbols. It has people who are examples for us, good and bad examples. And in this category, we find the parable of the Good Samaritan. The Good Samaritan is a good example that we should imitate, and then the priest and the Levite are bad people we should not imitate. So let's not try to hunt for too many symbols here. I've heard sermons that says the man was going down from Jerusalem to Jericho. Oh, his life was going down the hill. He had a difficult life. No, going down from Jerusalem to Jericho is probably not a symbol of his life turning bad. It was just a literal fact of the time. If you went from Jerusalem to another city like Jericho, you went literally down the hill. It's literal. It's not meant symbolically. This is not a place you hunt for symbols, I think. This is just an example story for us. So what happens to him? This Israelite man fell among robbers who stripped him and beat him and departed, leaving him half dead. Important details here. When the priest and the Levite are passing by and they are not sure if they're going to help him, they hesitate or they actually pass him by. Why? What does this have to do with the whole point of the parable? Who is your neighbor? You should treat your neighbor as yourself. And who is my neighbor? Well, the problem the priest and the Levite had was they're not sure who this guy is. He has been stripped of his clothes, and if you don't have clothes on, you have no ethnic national identity. The clothes told you who you were, and he's half dead. In other words, he doesn't talk. You can't listen to his accent and find out where he's from, his ethnicity. You can't ask him, so he tells you, yes, I'm an Israelite, please help me. He's half dead, so no clothes, no talking. You don't know if this man is an Israelite or not, and that's the whole point. The priest and the Levite interpreted your neighbor narrowly. Too narrow, more narrow than Jesus would. Yes, maybe they were liberal and interpreted neighbor not only as the family or the village, but maybe as all Israel. But if the moment is not sure that this man is an Israelite, because he has no clothes to prove it, he can't talk, the priest and the Levite pass him by, because the neighbor, that's only fellow Jews. But then comes a Samaritan, this group of people that were not exactly on friendly terms with the Jews. Remember, it goes back to the story of from the time of Ezra and Nehemiah, when the Jews had returned from Babylon and were going to rebuild Jerusalem and the temple, and the Samaritans, the people who were kept living in the area, and probably a lot of people who had been imported into the area by the Assyrians, when the Assyrians took the 10 tribes and dispersed them and moved people from elsewhere in the Assyrian Empire into this area of Samaria. These people were a mixed group ethnically, and to some extent also a little bit mixed religiously. They had some doctrines in their worship of Yahweh that were not completely orthodox. So the Samaritans and the Jews were not completely on good terms. You know that story. But Jesus makes the Samaritan into the hero of the story, because the Samaritan doesn't answer the question, who is my neighbor, with those who are of the same ethnicity as I am. The Samaritan asks the question, is this a fellow human being in need? And since it was, the Good Samaritan helps him. And he picks him up and binds his wound, pours on oil and wine, and takes him to the closest innkeeper, which, by the way, was in Jericho. The archaeologists don't know about any settlement between Jerusalem and Jericho at the time of Jesus. It's just wilderness. And Jericho was definitely a Jewish city. So this Samaritan came with a half-dead Jew into Jericho. He took a little bit risk on himself here as a Samaritan. What did you do to this Jew? Did you kill him? But he's not afraid to bring this half-dead Jew into Jericho. He just wants to save his life, even though they might question him for what he has been doing. So, the Good Samaritan, he's good because he has a wide definition of who is my neighbor. It's not only those who share my ethnicity, come from my type of people. It's a fellow human being, and I need to help him because he needs my help. So that's Jesus' point of the story, that whenever we see somebody in need, we have an obligation to help. It's any human being in need. And today, when we're living in this age of mass migration, which we do today, there are people migrating around the world to a much higher extent than for quite a long time. There are immigrants everywhere. People are moving from one country to another. And there is a natural human tendency to look at the stranger with a little bit suspicious eyes. You are not one of mine. You're an immigrant. You're different. Well, the message of Jesus in the Good Samaritan parable is we should help anybody in need. Any human being who needs my help, I'm there to help him. Well, thank you for joining me in this video. I hope you get some good discussions out of the material in this week's lesson. And I hope you use Logos to dig into the Word of God before the Sabbath School. See you again next week.